Hello and welcome to You've Got to Taste This. We're going to have another recipe we're going to cook today, and we're going to be making meatloaf. And I realize everybody has their own favorite meatloaf, so I'm going to be adding mine to the mix. And you're going to need, I use oatmeal. I find that it absorbs the extra liquid in the meatloaf mix a lot better than breadcrumbs. You're going to need barbecue sauce. You can use ketchup if you want to, but I prefer barbecue sauce. A large onion, 4 eggs, 4 pounds of lean, 90% lean hamburger or ground chuck. I mean, if you're going to be making a quality meal, you might as well make the highest quality meal that you can. Because if you use 80% lean, basically your meal is melting away and you pour the grease off of the dinner before you serve it. You're going to need about half a cup of milk. You're going to be needing some turmeric. That gives it a really nice, good pop of flavor. I use basil and rosemary and garlic powder. I'm also going to be trying this recipe with whole fennel seed to add a little bit of extra flavor. And I also use Bragg's liquid aminos. It takes the place of Worcestershire sauce. And I use kosher salt and then hand ground pepper. And when I get finally done, some people might like this, some people may not. I happen to love spinach, so I will be adding organic spinach into the mix before I bake it. So, let's get started. It's a good idea to go ahead and mix up your hamburger before you start and open up those chunks, because I store my hamburger in 1 pound packages for ease, which is great when you're having just a small meal. But if you're going to be making any kind of sizable meal, such as meatloaf or spaghetti or anything that requires a lot more meat, then I have to get 4 or 5 packages out and thaw them out and get them ready for preparation. Now, what I like to also do is season before I even really get started, before I mix. And as I said before, I do not measure. I never have. Except maybe when I very first started cooking. So we're going to be sprinkling some rosemary, and you can put in as much as you personally prefer. And then some basil. Give that extra little bit of flavor. Then also I'll be sprinkling turmeric. This is going to help bring out a lot of spark out of the dish. As far as the fennel seed is concerned, I'm probably going to put in about maybe 2 teaspoons, guessing by how much is falling into the milk. And add our eggs. I've already beat them up just for ease of preparation and getting the video done. And we're going to next be adding our onion. And if you don't like onion as much as I do, feel free to use a smaller onion. You don't have to use a large onion. And of course, if you only want to make 2 pounds of hamburger, then obviously you're going to scale back and make it accordingly. Now, I also, as I said, I use Bragg's liquid amino. That's going to give you some salt, but I also like to put some extra salt in. So I'm using kosher salt. Putting in some pepper. And then I'm also going to be putting in barbecue sauce. I grew up with my mom teaching me how to put ketchup in. And after I grew up and was cooking on my own, I didn't have ketchup one day and I didn't want to run to the store. And I had barbecue sauce at home. And I decided, well, it's close enough. So I tried it. I have never went back to ketchup again. So that should tell you something, how much more flavor barbecue sauce will put into your meatloaf. And I'm going to be entering in about a cup and a half, and we will go from there. Might need 2 cups of oatmeal to help give it the binding aspect of it. And I'm also going to be pouring in a half cup of milk. I may have to put more in order to adjust the consistency. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to knead this, and I'll be right back. And we are hand kneading the hamburger into the mix. I kind of laugh because a lot of your modern cooking shows it's all the rage now to go ahead and use your hands, your bare hands. Make sure you wash your hands, of course. But it's all the rage to use your hands, I've noticed. And it's funny because for the last 40 years, I've been using my bare hands when I've been making my meatloaf. And you can make this as wet or as dry as you prefer. If it's wetter, of course, it's going to take a little bit longer to bake because it's going to have to evaporate the excess liquid. As I said, I used approximately a cup and a half of oatmeal, and this is turning out really good. It's got a good consistency. It's got a good stick on my fingers, which is good, which means it's not too soupy. So I don't think I'm going to have to add any more oatmeal. And of course you can see all these wonderful chunks of onions that are going to be in my dish that are going to cook up with extra flavor. So we're going to pause here so I can get my hand cleaned off, and we're going to then proceed on. Okay, we're ready, and we're going to start putting the mix in the pan. Now, even though I have a Teflon pan, I still use a cooking spray in order to make sure that the hamburger doesn't stick. And the reason I do this is because if you're using 90% and above ground chuck or sirloin at 95, it's not going to produce as much melted fat as if when you're using 80%. And even at 80%, I have had my hamburger, my meatloaf, stick in the pan when I have tried to get it out for dinner. So I highly recommend that you use a cooking spray as well, unless you have issues with cooking sprays and you can't use them because of the ingredients or the chemicals that are in there. If you want to, you could also use butter. You can use a more natural oil. You can use olive oil. You don't have to use a cooking spray. You use what's good for you. And I'm going to end up making 2 loaf pans of your standard loaf pan. If you live alone and you're cooking for yourself, this is the best opportunity to cook in advance. And if you have a deep freeze, then once it cooks, you can after it cools, you can package it up and save it back, because meatloaf makes the best sandwiches that can be had. Now you're probably all wondering, I said I was going to have spinach, and I am. So I'm going to work the spinach in next while it's in the pan. And as you can see, I love spinach. I've got it covered up on top. I've already started to work this one in. And when you work it in, you want to make sure that your spinach is covered. Otherwise, you're just going to have burnt leaves on top. And it's not going to be as pleasant. And again, if you don't want to put spinach in, then don't. This is for your true spinach lover. I love spinach. I eat spinach salads. I put spinach in my soups. It doesn't matter what kind of soup I'm making, I put spinach in. So, like I said, do make sure that as much as possible you cover it up. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to get this one going. And any spinach that tries to escape, grab it and put it back in. Remember, get it covered up as much as possible if you're going to be using spinach. It will wilt with the heat of the oil that's going to be coating it. And I'm going to pause here again and clean my hands off. Okay. Now, after having put all the spinach in, I try to make it as even as possible. Have a smooth top so that we don't have any puddles forming. And as well as getting rid of any air pockets that may have formed when I was kneading the spinach in. Now, one last step. And we're going to put the rest of the barbecue sauce on the top. so we're going to finish out and just spread the barbecue sauce on top. That's going to cook and give a wonderful flavor. And again, you can use whatever barbecue sauce you prefer, whether you like Kansas City style or you like barbecue that has a lot of brown sugar in it. You can use whatever you prefer, because that's what cooking is all about anyway. It's finding the taste that we personally love and making them into dishes that we will treasure and hopefully teach our daughters and our sons, because there's nothing wrong with our sons learning how to cook. Okay, so that's how it should look before it's cooked, and then we're going to go ahead and put it in a 400-degree oven. And then don't forget one thing that is just really great. You can use regular russet or red potatoes, but on occasions like this, I love baking sweet potatoes along with my meatloaf. There is nothing better than that, the sweet tangy of the barbecue and the sweetness of the sweet potato to go along with a wonderful meal. So we'll be back as soon as this is done baking.